I'm always happy to speak with you, David, because obviously I feel like I've sort of followed you along this amazing journey you're having. I did one of kind of the earliest interviews. It was before you came out, but when you first started speaking about mental health and the
Yeah.
anxiety you'd gone through on a different show. And it's been really nice to speak with you along the way and see everything happening. So I'm trying to even think of, I guess I'm just going to really start with an open-ended question. You seem in a really good place these days. You seem in really good spirits. On The Masked Singer, you kept flying around. You were like almost literally soaring. How are you doing these days? Are you in a good place these days? You had as you said on the show, a difficult couple of years.
Yeah, I've it's been interesting to see like going back, looking at how it was trying to resist getting to this point.
Mm.
And it's kind of interesting to think of like the other alternatives that I thought were better solutions than to come to this point that I'm at right now in my life. And I'm glad that I'm glad that I've made it this far.
Me
And
too.
I feel really good where I'm at. I feel happy. Um, I'm still learning how to not try and be so apologetic and try to over explain. But I feel good because sometimes you feel like people who don't understand, you have to over explain to them to still try and get their acceptance. But I'm trying to learn,
Mm.
like, you know what? You can't convince everybody that you're a good person, or you can't convince everyone to like you. And that's okay. As long as you like yourself, that's what matters.
That is true, but a lot of people do like you. I did see that a lot of people were really rooting for you and really happy to see you back on Fox. Not to dive super into the heavy stuff, but you said alternatives you thought to get to this point, and that makes me think of, something that really stood out to me that you said on the finale, which was that there were times where, you know, you thought you'd be better off not being here. I mean, not to, like I said, not to dive right into it, but was that
Yeah.
suicide something you considered? I mean, obviously, I'm glad you're past that if that was the case.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like um yeah, there was a point before I had like come out publicly. I still hadn't come to full terms with myself
Mm-hmm.
because I believed just the way I was taught, like if you come to full terms with yourself, you're basically accepting yourself as like an enemy to God, essentially. And I didn't want to get to that point. And I truly believed at that time that if I did come to terms with myself and that I liked men and that I may possibly like date a guy and fall in love with a man, that I would basically lose my soul. And not just temporarily, I thought that I would like forever, like even when I die, like my soul would be lost. And so I didn't want to come to that. So I just kind of thought, well, this would be a better option. And when I realized after attempting to be straight for 15 years, probably more than 15 years at that point, since I was a little kid, I I realized no matter how hard I try, that's not what I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so you kind of come to a conclusion because you're taught so often that the LGBT community is evil and bad and being gay is evil and all you think about are all you want are sexual lustful things. So I thought that if that's what I'm going to become, I don't want to be that. And so you just kind of lose hope for yourself and you believe the narrative that's fed to you that it's like, I'm going to turn into something evil. So I'd rather end things before it gets that bad. Uh, but then I started realizing, like, well, what if I can, like, I would have these like discussions, debates with myself because they're like, I've literally felt like I was split in two. There's like a compassionate side of me that is like, David, it's okay. And another side that was resisting so hard, trying to protect myself from this evil side of me. And I would debate, I'm like, well, what if even if I was queer and even if I came out, what if I even was gay and what if I could still be a good person? Like, what if I could still contribute to life? What if I still had something valuable to offer to other people? Because to me, like, it didn't matter how much, because the other side of me was like, it doesn't matter how much good you can do. If you are gay, nothing will compensate for that. Nothing will be able to override that. Nothing good can balance out how horrible that part of you is. And so that's why you start getting hopeless. And I don't think churches realize a lot of times when they are like anti-LGBT, how the way they talk about things causes a lot of their LGBT members in their community to get to that point of believing. Because I've had so many people message me saying that they've contemplated suicide. I've had people who've had family members who were queer that did take their lives. And I know why they did. I understand it now because I was there and I almost thought that that was the right decision to make. So I realized, like, this is such a dangerous narrative that is being fed to people, both to LGBT people and to everyone else, that creates them to be homophobic. Because that's why I had internalized homophobia and why it was so hard for me to come to terms with myself.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I'm just trying my best to tell people, because so many people, they now they expect you that once you leave the congregation, or that you become gay, or you become LGBT plus in any form, that you are going to lose light. They're like, look, they lost light. They're going to be miserable now. And if they hear that someone took their life, they're like, oh, it's because they accepted their queerness.
Mm-hmm.
So that just shows that they were never going to be happy and that they were miserable. And it's like, you guys don't realize it is the discrimination and the outcasting and the phobia, the homophobia that you are casting on these people, where they feel like they have nothing left anymore. Everything that they had established their life on, their community, their church family, their legitimate family, now pushes them away because they're like, ooh, we don't want to be contaminated by this evil.
Mm-hmm.
And then when these people feel lonely and they've lost their tribe of people, their safe haven that they once had is gone, they feel like, what else is there to live for if my family and my peers and no one in my community accepts me anymore? And they take their life. And then those same people who pushed those people to that point say, it was their fault. Look, they were miserable just like we knew it. But it's like, you caused that person to be miserable. Like, please take time to consider what is going on. And, I still have people from time to time telling me, like, look, the light in his eyes is gone and he's not really happy. Look, he's not smiling. I'm like, I still smile, and I'm just like, I don't feel like I have to work as hard to try and prove that I'm happy. Like, oh, look, I'm happy because I have the gospel in my life and because I've been saved by God from myself. That was the narrative I believed.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, you have to stop looking at, just because someone is different from you, that they're evil.
Yeah.
And, we look at that with racism just, 50 years ago. I mean, there's still some racism we deal with now, but I think it's a good example to look 60, 70 years back in our country, in the US, when people would be like, look, that race is bad. Like, they're not the same as us, so they must be evil. And I think we're just, religious communities are still doing that with the LGBTQ plus community.
I mean, I have a list of questions here, but I'm going off script because I have so many follow-up questions. I'm so moved by what you're saying. I'm sad here. I mean, you can kind of see I'm almost tearing up, but I'm also happy that you're living your truth. It's like such a mixed emotions just listening to you. Just a one last question about kind of that rock bottom moment where you were thinking about maybe not being here. You talked about people in the church who have done that, and thankfully you did not. What you said, what stopped you? Like, what was the epiphany, the turnaround where you're like, no, I want to be here and I want to live the way I want to live? Was there a lightning bolt or anything like that?
I feel like it was a combination of things. I was starting to confide in people I think some of my friends started noticing that I wasn't acting like myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kind of said, to some of my religious friends, I'm like, I think I have to, I'm accepting that I'm bisexual. I'm accepting that I'm queer in some aspect. I'm, I may be gay. I don't know exactly, but I just know that I'm attracted to men. And this is a guilt, something I've been ashamed of for so long that I didn't feel like I could talk about. But when I started isolating myself, there was a time where I just wasn't even leaving the house unless I had an appointment that I had to go to. And I didn't have a job that required me to go out day to day. So I was just by myself. It was getting to a point where I couldn't even get off the couch. I was just, I don't know what it was. All I could think about was trying to decide what I was going to do with myself. And I had a friend who invited me to go get a snake, and
A snake?
a pet snake. Yeah.
I have a pet snake right over there. You see
Oh,
that
you
cage?
do?
That's my snake right
Oh
there.
my
That's
gosh.
Nagel the snake. You have a snake?
Oh, I had a
Oh,
snake.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I
What
love
what kind of
snakes.
what kind of
He's a
snake do you have?
he's a palmetto corn snake. He's Nagel the snake on Instagram for anyone watching. So like
Oh.
I love that a snake has come into the story. I mean,
Yeah.
you should have been the Medusa.
I'm
Anyway,
not Medusa.
but go
Um,
on. So tell me what happened with this
my
guy.
my friend invited me to get a snake, and sorry, she invited me to go with her to get a snake.
Okay.
And she was like, "Oh, she bought what did she bought a ball python, and I bought a Kenyan sand boa. I wasn't
Nice.
planning to buy a Kenyan sand boa, but I did. And uh her mom wouldn't allow her to keep the snake at her house. So she's like, "Can I keep it at your place? And then I'll like come check on it and feed it and stuff." And I was like, "Okay," but I didn't want to be around anybody at the time. So to be honest, I was agitated. I was like, I don't want anyone coming because I just didn't want to be around anyone. I kind of felt a little gross with myself to be around people.
Hmm.
But she would say, "Hey, I'm coming to check on the snake." And I'm like, "Okay, fine, do your thing." And I didn't want to really be, even though she's one of my best friends at the time, I didn't want to be around anybody, including her. And so she got the snake. She would come in, and then she'd come down into like the living room where I was, and then just like hang out with me and start talking to me. And I was really annoyed. I was like really just upset. I'm like, I just want to be alone. I don't want to see anybody. But I think it was like a hidden blessing. It was a blessing in disguise, because otherwise I would have truly isolated myself. And I feel like I was at such a low place. I didn't have any outside perspective other than my own mind spiraling down, that having someone there come in to check on me was a really important part of my just part of that time for me.
Mm.
And I think she could tell. I feel like she almost did it. Like I just wanted to be alone, and I could tell. I almost felt like she planned to have something there that she would have to come from time to time to check in on and just drop by to kind of check in on me as well. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm really grateful for her.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to a point where I just, I was praying and praying and praying, saying, "God, if you're really there, please, like, change me, please. I'm so tired of, I don't want to be this way." And then finally I've got on my knees one day because I felt something, because I was like empty at that point. I felt numb for like a couple weeks straight. Like I couldn't feel happy, I couldn't feel sad, I couldn't feel angry. Like I don't know what it was. All I could describe is it's like a numb feeling. You just, and finally there's like this glimmer of something. And that's when I dropped on my knees and I was just like, "God, if you are there, please help me and change me, because I don't know what else to do here. I'm just so sick of being this way." And I just felt this response come to me, just like peacefully, lovingly. And it just said, "David, you need to stop asking me this."
Wow.
And I was like, "What?" And it's like, and it said, "You've been asking this for over half your life now. You can see I'm not going to change this because it's not supposed to change. You're supposed to be how you are and be happy as you are. And now you need to take time to understand that. And I was like, well, I don't want to mess up. And then it responded back to me and it said, well, then perhaps you need to do what you think are mistakes. I was
Mm.
like, what I think are mistakes. And it's like, you're allowed to make mistakes. And as you make mistakes, you're probably going to realize that this wasn't a mistake after all. And so that's when I realized, you know what, I'm just gonna take that chance to make mistakes and allow myself to see what it's like to date guys and allow just to even like a guy. Because
Hmm.
up until I was 30, I didn't even allow myself to like a guy, even though I felt feelings. I was like bury under. So that was when everything turned around. And yeah, I started dating guys and I was just like, oh, so this must be the feeling that everyone talks about when, like, I'm singing Crush and it's about getting a crush on someone. I never could relate to that before.
Yeah.
And so then I'm like, oh, I think this must be what everyone says they relate to so much with my own song. I'm like finally 30 years old and knowing what it feels like to have a crush.
Well, you talked about that a bit on the show when you did All by Myself and maybe a couple other songs earlier about how, before you didn't relate to singing about love because you didn't think you deserved it or you hadn't experienced it. So like, yeah, are you
Yeah.
in a relationship? Are you dating? Have in the last couple years gotten to experience what it's like to be in love for, really the first time in your life? Have you had that epiphany as well?
Yeah, I've been able to date, I've been able to explore relationships and like I just yeah, I feel like I now know, because when I was in relationships before, like I would say I still like loved the girls I was in relationships with, but there's always like this barrier, like not like a literal barrier. It's just like something that prevented me from connecting to them the way that I assume most people want to feel when they're in a relationship.
Hmm.
I couldn't put my finger on it at the time, but I now realize I just was more attracted to guys.
Well, that's
um,
a question I have. I mean, I don't, people don't have to label themselves. People can do whatever they want. But when you first came out in June 21, it's almost been 2 years now, June 21. A lot of people, a lot of the trolls or whatever, they seem less focused on the fact that you were coming out and more on the fact of all the letters you said because they were like, make LGBT, like, and that was because obviously you weren't trying to like pinpoint like I'm just this one thing. But have you got in? Like more now you've had a chance to date men and also be out in the LGBTQ plus community, have you gotten more of a handle on, like, have you changed how you define your sexuality or are you still kind of fluid about it?
yeah, I use the word queer, even though I know like some people from an older time would say that that's offensive, but I feel like in our time it's more considered like it's just kind of like it doesn't have to be anything specific. You just know
Right.
you're not straight. You're not
Right.
the normal cis straight type of person. So I just say queer. I think I understood kind of an idea of what I was back then. I would say like I was on the spectrum of asexual as well. I just didn't want to confuse people anymore. Like even at that time, I identify it as like what people would say like gray sexual, demisexual, but it's like people would be like, oh my gosh, that's just another like sexual identity. Like we don't understand what that means. And so I just said honest on like I'm somewhere in the asexual spectrum. But basically what gray sexual or demisexual is, and I feel like this is just it's typical too. It's like it takes a while for you to feel
Mhm.
any physical attachment or any like physical affection, desire, period. It takes a while. So
Yeah.
um I would still relate to that. Like I don't think I don't know if I'm like as easily turned on as like a lot of other people who are gay and out and proud. So um yeah, so I don't, I've only explored dating guys at this time because this is what I've not allowed myself to do.
Yeah.
And I would say I'm still I'm I would say I'm definitely more attracted to guys.
Hmm.
And I still feel some attraction to some attraction to women, but I prefer to be with guys. That seems like the more natural thing for me. And I think as I like try to like process everything, I'm like, it's taken a while for me to deconstruct the way I was programmed growing up,
Yeah.
which is like, you're supposed to love only women, like
Mhm.
loving men is a sin and it's evil. Um, so I think I'm still trying to figure myself out. And so I just say, you know what, I'm queer. That way I know I'm not straight.
All you need to
And
say.
I love to be with I've loved being in getting to date guys, and it's been a beautiful thing. And it's yeah, it's
Well, I'm very happy for that. I do have to wrap up, but I want to follow up because I think it's very ironic that a snake was kind of part of this journey, because obviously snakes are considered, it's kind of biblical, like snakes are considered evil. They get a bad rap too. You know, they tempt people, whatever. So getting into the religious stuff, when I first talked to you around the time that you came out, it seemed like you were still trying to stay within the church. You didn't want to leave the church. It was your community. As you
Yeah.
just have astutely pointed out, leaving the community and not having that support system can make things a lot darker. And I know, like someone you've worked with, Dan Reynolds, you know, with Love Loud, is sort of trying to keep people who are out, who are queer, can stay in the Mormon community with acceptance. But like,
Mhm.
have you officially left the church? Like, you seem very spiritual still. You had an epiphany, a conversation with God that brought you to this place. But like, where's your spirituality or your religion or your relationship officially with the church at this point in your life?
Yeah, I feel like I've had to distance myself really from what I first based my faith on, like, and just faith in general, because of how misunderstood I was continuing to, like, I would try and go and talk to some of the church leaders in my church, in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Um, and I would try to tell them, like, this is how difficult it's been for me. I'm still trying to look for a place to belong here. And I would have an hour conversation with one of them, and after all that time, I would just see how they still were kind of like in denial of everything I had just said. And it's like them knowing that I contemplated taking my life, and that there are many other people in our church community that still do that. And many of them do reach the point of taking their life. And I was like, this needs to be addressed. And to get a response that was so blanketed, like, I was just like, I almost feel like you don't want to acknowledge that this is actually taking place in our church. Where I'd be like, this is what I came to conclusion of. I got engaged 3 times to 3 different women to try and follow what God wanted me to. And I realized this was wrong. And say, like, I almost took my life because I thought that was the right thing to do, until I felt this feeling. I received my own personal revelation from my situation saying, David, stop it.
Mm-hmm.
And they would just respond saying stuff like, oh, well, we just need to find you a good girl. And I'm just like, that's not going to fix it, because I've already tried that 3 times.
Yeah.
No, I mean, more than that, but I almost got married 3 times, and I realized that was
Didn't
going to
realize
be
that. Yeah.
dishonest. That wasn't going to be fair to the girls. And but that's the solution they tell us. If you tell them you're gay, they're like, you're not gay. You just struggle with same-sex attraction. You can still live a happy heterosexual marriage life, and God will bless you to overcome your weakness of being attracted to the same sex. And that's just harmful, because they tell you something that is not realistic, is what I've learned for myself. It wasn't realistic for me. Maybe for people who are more on the 50-50 bisexual spectrum can make it work. That didn't work for me. I was being very dishonest. The girls I was dating could tell. They could tell something was wrong in the dynamic in our relationship, and they didn't deserve that for the rest of their life.
Mm-hmm. 100%. So you have separated, at least for now, you've taken a step back from the church then.
Yeah, I would say that I was looking for people going through the same thing as me in the church, and I couldn't find it anywhere.
Well, you
Because
can find.
everything,
Mhm. Sorry, go ahead.
oh, sorry, it's just the Church of Jesus Christ, the LDS Church had a website called mormonsandgays.org. So it was like a resource for people going through it. And they're just like, look, they can do it. So can you. This person chose to be alone and single and celibate for the rest of the life. So can you. This person chose to still marry and have kids. So can you. And I would go to, I'm like, well, why do I not see? And so I went to the websites where people could actually tell their experience. And I saw the people that they made the same videos of on the mormonsandgays.org now on podcasts talking about how they almost killed themselves because it wasn't a realistic. They ended up like not, it's like there was one sweet girl, she made a video saying that she was going to be abstinent and remain single because that was what God's plan was for her. She tried to kill herself by getting skin cancer because she didn't like, it's wrong to kill yourself. But she's like, if I remain the way I am, I'm going to eventually give in to these feelings. She's like, I'm going to try and get skin cancer. That
Oh my
way it's a
God.
humane way to go. But then she ended up meeting someone, fell in love with another girl she met also in the church, and they got married and they're
Yay.
happy.
I'm glad that has
And
a happy ending. That story
yeah,
that's such a horrific thing to hear. A
but
horrific story.
but they hide those stories from the members themselves, trying to create this false narrative. And I was just like, I don't want to be that. And I feel like they did try to make me this false narrative. Like, look, David came out, but he's still abiding. He's still going to be single. I'm like, no, I would like to be married as well. Cause that's what you've taught me all my life, is that there's no greater happiness than marriage. And so I would like to have a relationship still. But they still try to paint it as if I was not going to have that. And I was like, no, I'm done. I'm done. I've done enough for this church with the intentions that I thought I was serving God. But I feel like I'm being taken advantage of at this point, and I don't want to lead other people astray who are suffering the same way that I was.
Wow. Well, I feel so weird that I have to wrap it up because I feel like we could talk for so much longer, and we will talk again at some other
Okay.
point during your journey. And also, it's a weird kind of note to end it on, but I do want to say you are serving God because you are all these people that went on mormonsandgays.com looking for the answers you were looking for and did not get them. They have you. And, I just want to say thank you for living your truth. I know this wasn't easy, but it seems like the floodgates are really open now, the way you speak about your life. And I think it's, for lack of a more eloquent way to say, I think it's really cool.
Thank you. Thanks.
So we didn't really get to talk about your single, but I assume it's informed by everything that's coming out June 2nd. It's called Up. It seems like it's an anthem. Is it informed by, everything, all these revelations and epiphanies you've had?
Yeah, I call it my transition song because it's kind of the segue from where I was into where I'm going now. And so it's kind of like the prelude to what's to come. And I'm really excited for people to hear this new music that's just kind of like, it's going to feel liberated. And I can't wait to show it with them. And Up will be the song kind of to prepare them for what's to come.
Well, I can't wait to find out what's to come. Probably some more love songs, crush, about real crushes. And
this time, yes.
and I'm just so happy for you. And we'll talk again when
you.
the new music comes out. But congratulations, everything, including the Masked Singer. And we'll talk soon. You take care of yourself.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thanks. And I appreciate it. Thanks for sticking with me, because I know even back then there was a time I got a little triggered about an article, the way it was made, and I was worried about who I was going to upset. And so I wanted to apologize for that too, because I didn't feel like you deserved the way I was. I had thrown you under the bus.
It's okay. I mean, at the time I might have been a little peeved, but now that I know the whole story, I totally get it. It's totally fine. Now I understand why that happened, and
it still shouldn't have. So it shouldn't have happened, and I apologize for that. So
apology accepted, but it wasn't necessary. But thank you so much for everything. And you take care of yourself. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Lindsay.
And then